I spent a lot of time thinking about how I want to wrap up PAX West 2016, how I want to encapsulate the experience, and I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it's just that my brain is so abused by the 28 hours I spent driving there and back, the cumulative 9 or 10 hours spent waiting in various lines, 3 to 4 hours just walking back and forth from the convention hall, and the remaining hours spent walking the convention floor. The density of doing to waiting is so thin that if it weren't for the constant barrage of loud noises and bright lights, PAX would be par with a sensory deprivation tank. Even in the moment, it becomes so steady and constant that it veers into the meaningless, a hypnotic white noise that is immediately forgotten, like the sound of tires on pavement. We mentally survive boredom by erasing it from our memories. Sensory information comes in, is found wanting, and is instantly thrown out. As a result, boredom isn't really something we remember, or to put it another way, we don't remember boredom as much as we remember being bored. It's a detached observational memory, a third-party summary of our own past state rather than a recollection of a formerly present state of mind. Once you tally up preparation and travel, I spent 6 hours of my life just to spend 15 minutes with a virtual reality tech demo of a Rick and Morty game that doesn't currently exist. And I mean that in the most incisive sense I can. The bit of gameplay that was on display wasn't actually on display. You could only see it by participating, and all the screens that allowed the presenters to monitor the player's experience were turned at angles that prevented outsiders from catching more than a glimpse here and there of what was going on. The whole of it staged to limit future memory and impede recollection. The gameplay involved was pure proof of concept. Could something like this conceivably work within the framework of Rick and Morty's humor? It's not only possible, but highly probable that the bit I played won't even be in the future game should it even get made. So, for all that waiting, I got to see an outline of a thing that might exist and a commemorative pin. After I recounted that story, Daniel Floyd of Extra Credits asked me the most natural question imaginable. Was it worth it? And I don't know. I don't know because I don't remember. The hours of standing in line have been compressed into single-point memories that no longer hold any weight. It's not a bad time, it's just time that has effectively vanished. From Calgary southwest to the Crow's Nest Pass, west to Fernie and Cranbrook, south to Eastport, Bonners Ferry, Pend Oreille and Spokane, west to Sprague, Ritzville, Ellensburg, and into Seattle. From Seattle north through Linwood, Everett, Mount Vernon, Abbotsford, east to Chilliwack, Bridal Falls and Hope, north to Merritt and Kamloops, east to Salmon Arm, Sicamous, Revelstoke, Golden, Banff, and at long last, sun long set, into Calgary. I've passed through all of this. I know this because the evidence says I clearly must have, but the spaces in between are gone now. In the end, the tens of minutes I spent catching up with friends, chatting about the state of online media with other video producers, and dinner with some new friends at the Cheesecake Cafe, these are the things that I'm more likely to retain. These are the things that PAX will likely become in my memories. Are 45 minutes of good conversation worth 28 hours of driving? What if you'll barely remember them? Content-wise, I suppose PAX was fine. I'm not sure because I ignored the vast majority of it. There's already so much standing in line for the things I would like to see or do or collect that I really can't be bothered to stand in line for things I'm at best passively curious about, whether that waiting will be ejected from memory or not. Part of this is that I'm generally more interested in the overall trends. What are the repeating patterns, the running themes across the convention as a whole? The other part is that the big-name demos are a bit of a scam. The incentives are all set up to cheat everyone, creators and audience, of authenticity. Like a dating site where everyone picks their best photo and lists their flaws as caring too much and loving too deeply. The convention floor is only friendly to the shallowest, safest, easiest to digest presentation packed into a capsule that will allow you to process as many bodies as possible in a limited period of time. Spectacle, in and of itself, isn't entirely without merit, but it suffers harsh diminishing returns. There's only so many times you can pass the giant branded dinosaur statue before it stops being a wonder and becomes a convenient landmark between the merch booth and the sky bridge. Virtual reality was predictably the capital letters big thing this year. It's interesting over the years watching VR slowly get better and sit now on the cusp of actually being good. It's still young, but slowly everyone is working out the kinesthetic dialect of virtual reality along with the sanitary logistics of sharing a VR headset with hundreds of people per day. For the next couple of generations of VR, though, the big experience of the Matrix you'll be replicating is having a giant cable hanging off the back of your head. I can't help but feel a sense of irony in that. Following in the footsteps of the Wii's motion controls and the Kinect and adding almost a decade of improvements, the Vive and Oculus aim to free players from the constraints of the couch, allowing them to not just wave their arms at their television, but to walk around realized immersive fictional spaces, only to then be tethered to reality by a literal tether of cables. Virtual reality is increasingly impressive, but the seams show quickly as practical issues rear their head. You put on the headset and you are freed to walk around anywhere that is within an 8-foot cube. As you approach the edge, you're confronted with a grid marking the edge of the playable area, a handy guide for preventing you from breaking things or hurting yourself, but a sudden reminder of the disconnect between perceived space and the actual distances. In one demo, I repeatedly punched a cloth wall while trying to pick up a fake paint can off a virtual shelf sitting against the edge of the simulated world. The reality of virtual reality is that we're still trying to figure out the best way of going somewhere while not going very far. It's the middle space between standard control dialects and augmented reality like Pokemon Go. If you want to go somewhere in No Man's Sky, you sit in your chair and push forward on the controls. If you want to go somewhere in Pokemon Go, you get up, move your body there. So how do we move our bodies a little bit without needing to move our bodies too far? And how do we translate that into a meaningful expression in the virtual space? Incidentally, Seattle is rich with Machop, with nary an Oddish to be seen. Is it strange that one of the things I'm most excited to bring home is a fighting-type Pokemon that can challenge the Dragonite Weedlord 420 leaves at the gym down the street? One of the best dimensions of PAX, of any con really, is the cosplay. Not just for the spectacular craftsmanship and creativity on display, but because it gives you a sense of what's connecting with people. What are the characters, the outlines, the stories that they see themselves in, or that they want to inhabit, to literally embody? As VR lets us swap our skin with virtual bodies, cosplayers rework virtual bodies onto their skin. Outside Golden, British Columbia is a segment of highway, a twisted, narrow stretch of road that clings to the edge of the mountains as it winds up and down the sides of the Kicking Horse Canyon. This is the highway you've been driving with me, but the one you're seeing isn't the one I remember. The highway was terrible, with brutally sharp turns, narrow shoulders, and insufficient guards. Access to the town was routinely cut off as chunks of road would slide off into the river below. Workers spent 10 years chiseling improvements out of the mountain, widening the berth, shoring up the walls, and abandoning stretches in favor of a brand new bridge and road blasted out of the rock. As you drive it, if you know what you're looking for, you can see fragments of the old road, bits and chunks of abandoned blacktop, but it's almost impossible now to really remember what the old road looked like, what it felt like to take its sharp corners stuck in a narrow lane while a tanker truck passed going the other way. I remember that highway, but I don't. I remember it viscerally. I remember how it felt, even as the path, the dips and curves and exact placement fades. Years back, I spent time in Australia where I took a road trip from Brisbane down to Sydney. I spent several days with my Australian friends coaching me through the process of relearning how to drive, how to be confident reversing one's instincts of which shoulder to check over, and remembering which hand triggered the indicator and which hand turned on the wipers. Logically, I know I drove on the left-hand side for the entire trip from Brisbane through Port Macquarie and down to Sydney because that is factually the way that Australians drive, but it's not the way I remember it. After I returned home to Canada and reacquainted myself with right-hand driving, going through many of the same mistakes with the wipers and the signals, my visual memories began to morph. The snippets of highway that haven't been erased have all been reversed. When I visualize cruising through Gold Coast on a drizzly November afternoon, it's all flipped. I'm sitting on the left-hand side of the car, going down the right-hand side of the road. I still turn left out of my apartment to get to Hungry Jack's, but now in my mind, I turn left from the right-hand lane. I'm not entirely sure how I want to encapsulate this year's PAX experience because I'm still not quite sure what this year's PAX experience will turn out to be. There is what it was, standing in lines, playing demos, people watching, good conversations, pin trading, walking, getting rained on, getting depressed, getting excited, enjoying Seattle and pining for Calgary, but how much of that will translate into what it will be a week or a month from now? The impressions that are handed out are inherently suspect, delicately curated for maximum impact and devoid of the messy charms of a more engaged experience. Many border on illusory, apparitions that resemble the idea of a future experience while containing little, if any, of the ingredients that experience will actually be made of. They are, for good and ill, roads that will be paved over.